So my country for the Foods of the World project was Japan, and today I will be making nikujaga, which is a Japanese kind of stew. The ingredients for this include an onion, carrots, gold potatoes, beef, shirataki noodles, snow peas, some neutral flavored oil, dashi, which is a Japanese soup stock, mirin, which is kind of like a rice wine type thing, soy sauce, sake, and sugar. And I left out the sake for age purposes. So the first step in this was to make the dashi stock, which is it's a stock you buy it in a powder, and it smells really bad because it's made out of a fish, and it's the same stock that's used in miso soup. So to make this, I bought the powdered type, and you mixed the powder with water to create the stock, and then I set it aside so that I could continue on with my cutting up my vegetables and such. So this recipe is actually a pretty base food. It has meat, potatoes, noodles, so it's very filling and pretty nutritious. And Japan is a country whose population lives off of a pretty staple diet. They don't have a lot of seasonings and like flair to their meals. It's pretty basic stuff because a lot of it stems from their religions, which is mainly Buddhism and and so Shinto. And the reason of this is because both of those religions decide that any like decorations, like things that you don't need for basic survival are not necessary. So here I am finishing up. My dashi sauce is done. I am going to get some vegetables to continue on with my meal. And actually there's a couple different cutting techniques that I used in this recipe to cut up my vegetables that the recipe was very specific on for making sure that the vegetables stayed in their shape and didn't get split whenever you boiled them in the water. So with the carrot, we used a rangiri cutting technique, which is where you cut it lengthwise in half, and then you cut it into like kind of triangular pieces. And I thought this was interesting because I've obviously never cut a carrot like that. So with this onion, we were supposed to cut it into these kind of long triangle pieces. It was like wedges. And if I was going to make this again, I probably wouldn't do that because it was like the pieces were way too long and it was too chunky. It might have just been how I did this. So using beef in this recipe was important because that is one Japanese staple, which I thought was really interesting since in the major religions of the country, they don't eat a lot of meat because it's kind of like a do no harm type religion. So that was interesting. And so now I think after I cut this onion up, I'm going to cut up the potatoes, which uses a different method of cutting that I learned, which is called mentori. So this is where after we cut the potatoes into quarters, we have to smooth the edges of the potatoes with a knife, which I don't know. I kind of thought it was a little bit wasteful. Maybe I was just doing it the wrong way. But you do this so that they will not break whenever you put them into the stew. So we did this, and yeah, it was a little labor intensive, so I might have slacked off about the end. So some of our common Japanese imports are beef, corn, and pork. And these are pretty basic things that most countries import, not anything super spectacular. But you can kind of see that over time they've imported a lot more like cereals and processed foods, just probably because of, I don't know, times changing. And Japan mostly imports foods from the United States, which makes sense because we have a pretty good alliance with them. But they export mostly fish, beef, a little bit of beef, apples, and green tea, so kind of things that we would use here, because Japan is a fishing country. Obviously they're an island, so they do fish for a lot of their income, and they grow rice, which is something that a lot of those Asian, southern, or I guess Western Asian countries will do. Yeah, so they export about $2 billion worth of fish, which is insane. That's a lot of fish. And yeah, they fish for, I thought it was interesting, those unagi, the grilled eel, was one of their common dishes. And that is not something that obviously we in the United States eat often. So that was interesting to see. And I think you can prepare the unagi a lot of different ways, which is, I don't know. I know I've eaten it on sushi before, but I don't know if I'd be okay with just eating it straight. I found some very interesting videos of fishing for unagi whenever I was doing my research on this topic. So, as you can see, I have cut up my potatoes, and I am going to get a pot so that I can boil my shirataki noodles. And when I bought the shirataki noodles in the little Asian food market store, they came already in water, which I thought, like, cooked and in water, so that was different because generally you buy dry noodles that are not cooked and you have to boil them. But for this, they were actually in the refrigerated section, and here they are in water already. And whenever I was reading up on them, I heard you are not supposed to smell them. I do not know why, but apparently they smell really bad and you will not want to eat them if you do. So I am draining the water out so that I can set them aside. Yeah, and the shirataki noodles, when I was doing a little bit of research on them, which I didn't do until after I had already tasted this nikujaga at the end, they're made out of a type of root, and they have a really weird texture. And I don't know, I was not a huge fan of them, it was just interesting. So, yeah. They're often called miracle noodles, which I don't really know why, but they're made out of konjac root, which it's kind of gelatinous how they taste. Like, it's just a very interesting texture. So, I don't know. I guess it's personal taste or opinion. So noodles are something, like, I guess every culture has noodles, but especially in these Asian countries, they have so many noodles. When I went to this Asian store, there were tons of them. It took me so long to find the type that I wanted. And so now I am getting out my supplies to actually start the stock, and this took me a while because I did not realize that our stock pot was so far back there. So I'm getting out a stock pot so that I can make, because that's generally what you make kind of stew type items in. And so I'm going to heat it up to medium heat so that, and add some oil, which I used avocado oil because that was the only like unscented kind of neutral oil I had. And then I'm going to saute the onions. And they said to saute them, but then they just said, or the recipe said that we should coat them with oil. So I sauteed them for a minute and coated them with oil, and then I was going to add my beef, which I think that I was not really happy with how the meat turned out, and I think it's because it was cut too thin. So I think whenever we finished, it was a little bit tough. It was in kind of big pieces. I think if I was going to make this again, I would definitely cut the beef a little bit thicker and probably into smaller kind of cubes or squares. But I was not there when the beef was being purchased, so I had no say in that. So I just had to wait for things to kind of heat up, and I did not realize until a little bit later that I forgot to boil my my pan of water for the shirataki noodles. So yeah, and the reason you have to boil those noodles is because, as I previously stated, they smell really bad, so you put them in the water and boil them for a minute to get the smell off before you put them into your stew. And I kind of, with the seasonings of this, was not extremely happy. I'm kind of a seasoned person, so I love when there's a lot of flavor, and I think there was a lot of flavor, but you couldn't taste like the soy sauce and or the mirin. Really, I could taste I really liked the dashi stock, however. So I am waiting. I just now turned on the boiling water, which is lucky me that the meat takes a lot of time to cook, because I definitely would not have had time to do that. So some other things that I learned whenever I was researching about Japan was the cooking utensils are obviously are a little bit different. I wouldn't say like insanely different, but what I love about them, I love the spoons. Whenever you go to like those sushi restaurants, the Japanese ones, they have those spoons that you eat the miso soup with that are kind of like the long, I don't really know what they're called. I probably should look that up, but they're long and they're kind of wider, and I really like them. They're very easy for sipping. And then the chopsticks, which would have been very helpful for eating this meal because it was extremely difficult to eat with a spoon. And so I had to get the assistance of a fork, and that was kind of awkward. So another interesting thing, which is kind of like a staple, I think, in a lot of Asian households, is the automatic rice cooker, or like a rice cooker in general, which I want to invest in at some point because I love making rice. And I know there was no rice in this recipe, which is very sad, but it just cooks it a lot faster and a lot better than how you can cook it on the stovetop, which is very difficult. So I'm waiting for my onions to saute a little bit before I add the beef, which I'm about to do. Another thing is the storage of things in Japan, which a lot of times things are stored in a black, like earthenware ceramic jar called hangari, and you use this to store things like things that are pickled, or like soy sauce, or pastes like soybean pastes that are used. And obviously soy sauce is used very frequently in Japan. So this nikujaga could be an example of a food that could be used to be brought to shrines in Japan for religious ceremonies and things like that, because in these countries many different gods are worshipped, and ancestors are very appreciated and worshipped as well. So this is this would be something that they could bring to their ancestors in at the shrine, at the temple. And there's a lot of household shrines. I don't really know exactly what they're called, but they're ones like the little remembrance shrine in their house that a lot of times you'll bring food to, and gifts and flowers and things like that. So if you made this, you would bring a little bowl of it to your household shrine for your ancestors, or you could bring it to the larger shrines, temples, to bring to the gods. And yeah, so I probably would. I don't know if I would make this meal again. I think I would make this meal again with different noodles, because as I previously said, the noodles were just such a weird texture. And I would probably learn how to cook the meat better, because the meat was not cooked well, and that was my fault. As you see, I have added the meat. I am waiting and stirring, which I'm just trying to cook the meat and get it all. I think because the pieces were so big, it was a little bit difficult to get it cooked the same amount on every piece, and it was very interesting, and I couldn't really get the meat to separate. A lot of it was, I think it was just cut so thinly that it stuck together, and it was really hard to cook like that. So not to blame the butcher, but it was definitely mostly my fault. So I'm just stirring this, and I in a minute will add my vegetables and noodles, which my noodles are now boiling, so I can put those in to get the smell off. And those only had to be boiled for 1 minute, so that was really nice, because obviously you don't want to boil them for too long, or else I don't really know if they would get, I don't think, they're not like wheat noodles, because wheat noodles, if you have them in the water too long, they get so big and puffy, and they just take on a lot of water, and they're kind of gross. But these are stored in water, so I assume that they don't really absorb it as much. But I think, so a lot of these noodles are mint. They don't really have their own flavor, but they take on whatever flavor they're in, which is really nice for this dish because of the dashi stock seasoning, I guess, which is something that would soak into the potatoes and the noodles, and I guess the meat too. So I am stirring and watching my noodles boil and hopefully get the flavor off of them from the water and packaging. I don't really know why they smell bad or taste bad before you cook them, but I don't really want to find out. So I will be putting my vegetables in just a minute, and my noodles, which will be a task. So I am now going to put all of my vegetables and my noodles in just a minute into my stock, which I will put in a minute. So yeah, so now all of my vegetables are going in. I had my boyfriend actually cut up the carrots because he wanted to. I helped him. I don't really know if that's allowed or not, but that's what we were doing. So I had those on the other counter along with all of my seasonings that I had out at that point. And here I am grabbing a strainer so that I can get my shirataki noodles into the stock pot with the rest of my meal. It's very steamy. So I'm gonna stir all of this up, make sure that I was really worried about the potatoes because you didn't cook the potatoes before, which maybe that's common for stews. I don't make a lot of stew. But it was quite interesting because they really did soften. So after I poured my stock, as I'm doing right here, and some of it didn't dissolve, so I had to kind of scrape it out. You stirred it around, and then you covered it and cooked it for, I think it was 13 minutes after this. And I don't know, the potatoes really absorbed the flavor and they got a lot softer. I just was very surprised about this. Maybe it's a common thing. So here I am adding my mirin, which I thought was going to be just like a little bottle, but it was actually huge. I thought it might be like a seasoning, so I just kind of assumed that it was going to be a powder, but it was not, and it's kind of huge. So I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of this. But and I'm just washing off my tablespoon with very hot water. So I'm going to get my soy sauce and my I didn't use sake because obviously I couldn't buy it, and my parents did not really want to buy it because they didn't know what we were going to do with it afterwards. So we just kind of left that out of the picture. I don't know, it was only 2 tablespoons, so I didn't think it would make a huge difference to leave it out. I thought that the tablespoon of sugar was such an interesting addition to the recipe because I feel like sometimes entrees should not be sweet, and I know a lot of Asian meals are pretty sweet with their like meat and potatoes. I feel like that should be savory, but that's my bringing up, I guess. So you did have a tablespoon of sugar in here, which I thought was really weird, but it actually tasted pretty good whenever you put it all together. Now I'm adding the soy sauce right here, and that I thought it was going to be a lot of soy sauce. I thought you would be able to taste it a lot more, but you really were not able to taste it, which was kind of unfortunate because I really like the taste of soy sauce. And then I just stirred it around to kind of try to incorporate it into the dashi stock because I don't know. I was very worried about the flavor of this, but I actually really liked it. I had very low expectations coming out of it because I didn't think that I did very well, but barring the gelatinous noodles, I probably would make it again, and I really did enjoy it. So I'm going to get the rest of my seasonings. I had to wash my tablespoon again and wash it with my soap and water and all that junk so that I don't cross-contaminate things in my house, especially not the sugar. So yeah, and I think I have all my information. I think the cutting techniques were very interesting for this because they really did work. All of my potatoes were in their shape, and they absorbed all the water. That was really good. I think next time I definitely would have peeled my potatoes, which they never mentioned doing, and I feel like I probably should have assumed that, but I did not, and it was okay. I just the skins kind of peeled off on their own and then were sitting in the soup, so that was kind of interesting. So next time I would definitely peel those. And so I just took them out after I cooked them, which I guess is okay. It's not gonna do any harm. So yeah, I am I was actually thinking about trying to substitute my sake with some rice vinegar, I don't know what it's called, because Sake is just a wine that's made out of rice, and whenever I was researching, because I knew we weren't going to buy any what to substitute it with, it said that we could use rice wine, so that's what I have in my hand right there. But you had to mix it with water, and I didn't know if it was worth it or not. Maybe next time I probably would either just invest in some sake or mix the water, but at that point I hadn't really contemplated what I was going to do about that, and so I just kind of let it be. So in this step, the next thing I had to do was cover it and cook it for 30 minutes, which I will do, and here I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do about the sake, because I am a definite rule follower. I'm not very good at cooking, so if I stray from the recipe, I fear for my life here, but it was actually very good. I wonder how it would have tasted if I would have put the vinegar in, but it was really good without it, so I'm not super worried about that. So now I am going to turn it down to low heat, cover it, and leave it for 13 to 15 minutes. And I ended up only doing 13 because my potatoes got really soft, and I didn't want them to get too mushy. I think that would be gross. So I left that, and here's the result in just a minute. So in just a second, here is the finished result. It was very good, and we just plated it in bowls.